Welcome everyone. My name is Divya Pawar and I am a training coordinator at the Temple Small Business Development Center. We help small businesses start and grow, and we're doing this through consulting over the phone or through Zoom and with a robust calendar of training events. You are here for the Food Business Series, How to Create, Trial, and Retail Customers webinar. This webinar is the 8 in the 9-part series, and it will cover how to get your product on shelf and off the shelf. We will also have office hours tomorrow from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. where you can ask specific questions. I will post a link for it in the chat. For the webinar, we have all the attendees muted and we encourage you to put your questions in the chat or Q&A. All attendees will receive the presentation and recording after the webinar. This webinar is presented by George Latela and Mark Plumondon from Tandem Associates. And with that, I will turn the floor to Mark.
Thank you, Divya, as always. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're doing all right. Happy to have you with us. I think I recognize everybody's name from a previous webinar. If I'm wrong, if this is your first, let me know. But otherwise, I think you all look familiar. So tonight, as Divya said, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get your product theoretically on a shelf or anywhere where you're going to get your trial, and then hopefully, repeat as well. So, and we'll talk about the role of retailers in that aspect as well. So with that, we'll get started. And then, as you know, just go ahead and jump in anytime in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll address whatever questions you might have. So I'm going to start, and then we'll get going with George. I think you know both of us at this point, so we'll just blow past the two bios. And as Divya said, this is the 8th out of 9. We have one more on new product development next week, and then the boot camp is on the 11th. And I'm going to let George talk a little bit about the boot camp while we're here.
Hey, welcome everybody. Good to see. I agree, Mark. I think all the folks that we've had in at least one or two other webinars. So I know we've shared this with some of you folks, both within our webinars and also in our office hours. But I would encourage all of you that are on the call to certainly come to the boot camp. You're welcome to come and just watch. Or the whole reason we set this whole thing up was to try to get you guys ready for prime time. So this is kind of like we'll call it an outline, a loose outline of what you would need to do to actually sell your product to somebody. So the way we've kind of set this up is we assume you're either going to go to a bank for money, or family member for money, or an investor for money, or you already have a product and you have a business case, and you're going to take your product to a third party to sell the product. So that's kind of what we talked about here. So what we would expect you guys to do in a couple weeks on Saturday the 11th is either formally or informally take us through these things. So this would be how Mark and I would do a PowerPoint presentation. So the first thing we call is the agenda slide. Tell us why you're here. So anytime you get a meeting with anybody, not certainly in food, but really in business, there should be a reason why you're there, and they should grant you the meeting based on the agenda or based on what they know you want to talk about. So the second thing, we're going to talk probably in pretty much more detail next week in the new product piece, but we've kind of touched on this in all the different sessions, and that's the concept statement. So if you have a physical product, obviously you can bring it, introduce the product, or if you have an idea or a concept or some visualization of what you're thinking about, you would want to bring that, okay? And then tell us, really importantly, if you remember, and I have a couple slides, my normal slides, know what problem you solve for the customer. What's the benefit to the customer and the consumer? So that's what we're talking about there. That next piece, Mark talked about a couple weeks ago, and we talked about brand strategy and segmentation. I've talked about segmentation in a couple of my webinars too. In fact, we both have a couple of slides tonight. And that's basically if you have a current user, or if you've been able to identify a competitor and identify their user, that's when you want to tell people, here's who we think will use this product, or here's who we know will use this product. And then you go and do some of your customer insight and business opportunity or the trend. So that's a lot of the secondary stuff we've talked about in a couple sessions. Very important, and we'll talk about this again next week as well, but how are you going to get the product from wherever it's made to the consumer? So again, if you're selling through a third-party retailer, they want to know, how's it going to be delivered to my store? Are you going to bring it to the store? Is it refrigerated? Is it frozen? Is it going to be a third-party distributor? Is it going to be UPS or FedEx or whatever? They really want to know that. And then, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, what are your plans for creating awareness and trial of your products? And then finally, which a lot of people forget to do, is what is your ask of us? What do you want that person to do at the end of the meeting? Do you want them to authorize products? Do you want them to give you another meeting? Do you want them to give you a test, it's 1-store test or a 5-store test? Like, tell us what you want us to do. So this is the third time we're doing this. And we've had people do very formal PowerPoint presentations because they've actually already had a legitimate business. And we've also had people literally come sit with us in the morning and come talk to us for 10 or 15 minutes in the afternoon with either 1 page of notes or something like this, 1 page with 4 or 5 bullet points. So again, please don't feel like you're not ready for prime time. The whole point of the boot camp in the morning is to really get you to think through everything. And then in the afternoon is basically to come back and say, okay, here's my base, here's my business case. And again, Mark and I, we actually have a couple of our colleagues that are going to join us. What we'll do in the morning is we'll give you a little bit of content, but we're going to do a lot of discussion. So we'll actually put you all into breakout rooms. So for those of you that have attended the office hours, it'll be kind of similar to that, except you'll have your own room. So if you tell us that you want to present, I'll come in the room and talk to you individually. Mark will come in, Sherry will come in. We'll have a couple of other people coming in. So you'll almost be able to get like the consulting thing from us. And then you'll have probably like an hour or two to kind of put your thoughts together, either formally or informally. So the plan right now is we're going to go from like 9 till 11:30 on Saturday morning, take a half an hour break for lunch. And then we'll start the presentations at noon, and we'll go as long as anybody has presentations. So again, you're welcome to come on and participate. You're welcome to come on and observe. I think you'll benefit from that time. So did I miss anything, Mark?
No, other than the only other thing I would add to that is we're not looking for you to share financials or anything like that at this
Right.
point. It's just the concept and sort of your thinking behind it and answering these questions.
If you guys have seen Shark Tank, it's basically Shark Tank without the numbers. So
Exactly.
Yep. Great.
Terrific. Any questions on that so far?
Nope.
Good. Okay. Well, then let's keep talking about trial and repeat. So, as we've talked about through the first 7 or 8 weeks of this, let's assume, and this is a good setup for the boot camp that George was just talking about. So you've come up with a great concept, which is half the battle or more than half the battle. Hopefully your product actually delivers, or your service delivers well against that concept. So you have some proof of concept at that point. You should be, if you haven't already, done some work on identifying your target audience. And we talked about this in the past a bit, that you can't just assume because, your friends and family have all tasted it or done whatever, and they all think it's great. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to try your product or be interested in your product. So you need to narrow it down, do some thinking about who you really think the most productive target audience will be. It could be that lots of people will be interested, but you really want to sort of hone in and focus on a select group so that you can really be efficient in the way you're communicating with them. You got to believe that consumers are interested in your product. That's good, and whether you've done a little bit of homework, research, secondary research, primary research, or whatever, that's all great. Now, so you've got all that behind you, and now you actually have to get them to try your product. So how do we do that? So one of the first steps, obviously, is you got to let people know about the product. Somehow you have to create awareness, and there's lots of different ways that you can do that. Putting it on a shelf is one way. Putting it on your website is another way. Going to events, all kinds of ways of explaining or showing the awareness, or it's trying to build the awareness of what your product or your service is all about. Social media, as we've talked about last week, is a really good cost-effective way to do that, because it's basically mostly your own time maybe a little bit of extra cost for somebody who's helping to do some photographs or whatever, but it's a great way to start building some awareness of your product. Word of mouth, obviously, is part of it as well. It's an extension of social media, but any events or anything else you do to try and spread the good news is also valuable. You can do direct marketing. So you can, one of the, a while ago there was a company that wanted to target like office buildings and people having lunch in office buildings. One way to do that, and obviously we all get this in printed menus, you could drop off, a flyer at the office buildings and try and, get that distributed to those people who are looking to go out at lunch later that day. That's, it's a captive audience. It's people looking for lunch. You're in the location near for their lunch and you tell them about your product. There's obviously many more examples of direct marketing. Earned media, we talked about a few weeks ago, which is, different than paid media, which is the advertising piece. Earned earned is when you get published, through PR or a third party that decides to do that and spread the word about you. So if you can get some, a local newspaper person or a local radio station to do a story about your product or service, it can be very valuable and very cost effective. Okay, so we've now built some awareness about our product. So now people are aware. Now you got to get them to try it. You got to get, in most of the cases, you're looking for new people to buy it if you're new. And sometimes once you get them to try it once, you want them to get to try other things, even different flavors of what you're doing, different products you're now offering. So there are existing customers that have had, hopefully, a positive experience, and you want to get them to expand their trial of some of the other products in your line. So, different ways you can gain trial. The most obvious and proven is sampling. And there's we'll talk about lots of different ways that people can sample. As you know, everybody pretty much loves free stuff, especially food. It's a great way to try something, especially if it's a food product that they're not familiar with, and are a little bit concerned about whether the taste or the texture or whatever. If you can sample it and you get over that hurdle for them and they taste it and they go, wow, this is really good, then they're going to be very interested in buying you next. It also, it provides a whole positive vibe towards who you are. If you're willing to give your product away in a small sample size or however you do it, it already reaches out to people and say, okay, these guys are really confident about your product and they're trying to get me. And I like that they're trying to get me as a consumer. So that's a positive thing. Different ways of doing it. So there's lots of captive audiences out there, right? That you want to leverage, that you want to take advantage of. So if any of you have been in a retail environment where they're offering sampling, this is one example of it. So Costco has made an entire business out of it, practically. They, you walk around the store, manufacturers pay to have their product sampled by their demonstrators. And if you've ever spent any time in a Costco, people literally seem to go for lunch or whatever. That there's so much variety of what's offered, and people go from one sampling station to the next. And very often it leads to a purchase because they sit there and go, oh, that's a really interesting cheese. I think I'll buy that for my family, or whatever it might be. Grocery stores clearly do some sampling. Deli counters, I'm sure George in his second life, or maybe first life, with his business, if somebody wants to try your macaroni salad or a slice of meat or cheese or whatever, giving that sample over the counter just to get them sort of on the hook and bring them in is a very easy and pretty cost-effective way of getting some trial and hopefully a purchase. There's different other ways. So, in food trucks, you can do it in a food truck. You can do it at food courts. If you've ever walked around in a mall, and within a food court, you'll see people standing out in front of their kiosk or their little counter section, hoping to lure you in because there's lots of different options in that food court for you to go to. So they'll have somebody standing out in front of it with a platter full of stuff for you to try and hopefully bring you right in. You can go to community events or school functions, sporting events, and sample there. Set up your little table, and while that's going, sometimes you might have to pay a small fee to have a table at a community event. Other times, these things are looking for people to come and participate in it, so it adds more value to all the people from the community actually coming in and doing what they're there to do, whether it's, there's rides for kids or other events like that. So it's either low cost or free way for you to really get in front of a lot of people in your community or extended community and get people to try it. It's a variety of audiences. You'll have different age groups and all that. It's a great way to get some research and in terms of feedback to your product and your concept, because while they're there and you sample, you want to engage them in conversation and talk about what you're doing. Obviously you have passion for what you're doing. You want to get that across, and then you want to have them sample it and then give you feedback of what they think. And if they are, so-so about it, then you got to explore, what didn't they like about it? If they're raving about it, then that's great. And you want to leverage that. You want to hear what they're saying about it, and maybe even getting their information so that you can stay in touch with them, as you go on. They might be comfortable giving you their email or whatever, and then you can start a conversation with them outside of that specific event, which can be very valuable. Food shows, these are a little bit more formal in terms of events where you can go and everybody gets a booth and you pay and people walk around, and a lot of times retailers and buyers will go to these events to learn about new products. And so it's a very valuable experience from that perspective as well. Okay, how do you, besides in-person sampling, a lot of that was what we were just covering there. There's different ways that you can sample, but not be in person that way. So right now, the world is moving towards digital coupons with different retailers. So I don't know where you all shop for your groceries, but if you have downloaded their app, and you will see that you're going to get access to specific coupons. It could be a free product, it could be a deeper discount on something, but it's a great way that retailers are trying to get experience from other manufacturers to try and add value to their customer base, to their frequent buyer base, and get some new experiences that way. Direct mail, we've all seen this and experienced it for years, where you can get something through the mail. It can be costly, but if you share the cost with somebody else, it's not bad. You can spread out that cost. Another tool is to cross purchase with other items. I'll show you an example of this in a minute. Sample kits, there are some companies out there that will put a whole bunch of samples together, and then everybody shares the cost of that kit, and it goes out to a customer that way, and it makes it a more cost-effective way of doing it. And then with today's world where everything is being shipped overnight or in a couple days, a lot of these companies have figured out that you can impact something into that box as a way to get somebody to sample or try a new product, but it also offsets the cost of that shipping because you're paying to put your product or your coupon or whatever in there. And recently, due to COVID, so retailers have also started programs where they're click and collect. So if any of you have had experience or read about that, so this is where you order it online, but instead of having it delivered, you go and pick it up at the retailer. What they've done is, while there are people are shopping that for you, and they gather all the things you ordered online, to also throw in a sample of one or two other items that a manufacturer has paid for them to insert that with this other shopping experience. So it's another way to reach people, especially if they're not going in the store anymore. With COVID, people have curtailed how much they're going into stores. So it's a way for manufacturers to get back in front of potential buyers or consumers. And office buildings is another example. We talked about that a little earlier, where you could actually deliver a platter of food or desserts or whatever it is to people in that office building setting, if you happen to be near that, and that's sort of a collective audience that you want to latch onto. Special size packages, we've all seen this, where you can do trial sizes or bonus packs. You say you're giving 30% more, which creates more value for the consumer, and they go, okay, I'm going to buy that product, that detergent, that whatever, because it's coming with extra volume in it, extra content, and that's worth my while. There's seasonal and holiday packages. Certainly people have latched onto this with Easter and Halloween and Christmas, where they'll change the packaging and try and get some new trial out of seasonal varieties of what they're doing. You can do an impact sample, which is not as popular as it used to be, but you can certainly do that if you're a larger product, that you can then pack a smaller size sample of it. So here's some different examples of trial sizes that are out there that we see at retail or whatever. So left and right, those are like trial sizes that are in drugstores and the like, that they're travel sizes is another term they use for it. But it's a great way for you to let people try your product in a way that without them committing on a full size product. So it's a cost point. A lot of times these are like less than $1 or around $1, and you can get people hooked that way and then buy a full size item. The York peppermint patty is a good example of, instead of buying a full size candy item, these are like what they call change makers. So these might be a quarter or 15 cents, 10 cents, and you get one, you try it and you go, oh yeah, those are really good. I'll have to look for the full size package later. And the other ones are on the pet side. There's other examples of the same thing, different smaller sizes, ways to gain trial. Again, when we talk about captive audiences, manufacturers have definitely figured out a way that this is a good avenue to gain some trial. So hospitals, Pampers has been in hospitals for decades, and basically when the newborn is born, the first thing that they get around their body is a pamper, and you get coupons or samples when you go home from the hospital, and you've already experienced that it's a good experience, and therefore you're going to keep buying that. So there's different diapers out there, but obviously P&G has spent lots of money over the years getting that program up and running, and still does well. You've all been to dentists where it's the same thing. Very often they'll give you a sample size of toothpaste or a toothbrush after your visit to encourage you to continue good oral health, and the manufacturers are paying for that placement for them to give you their toothpaste or whatever it is, and realizing that if the dentist is giving it to you and you use it and it seems to work okay, you're going to stay loyal to that particular product. Dermatologists do the same with some skin cares and lotions. Hotels have done it for years, where a manufacturer will create special sizes for hotel bathrooms, so that people can get that experience, and then when they get home, make a full size purchase. College campuses, that's an early developing captive audience. For food, they're making some big decisions at that point when they're away from home, what kind of food products they're going to choose on their own instead of what mom and dad are buying for them at home in the grocery store. And manufacturers have figured out, if I do some sampling there and they like it, they're going to become lifelong consumers of my product. And the Kind bar is one great example. If you've ever seen him talk about it, actually he's on has been a Shark Tank judge for a few times. He has absolutely said that was a big part of their success, was they gave small samples out at college campuses, and they created quite a buzz for it, and then the kids would buy the full size. And even within bars, they do it as well with like flavored alcohol drinks. Absolute is one good example, where if everybody might be familiar with the regular vodka, but not their cucumber melon vodka or whatever the flavor would be. So they would go in and host trial nights or sampling nights through the bar. A lot of times they hand out merch with it, t-shirts and hats and that kind of stuff. And you get an opportunity to sample it, like it in a food service environment bar, and then when you go home, you want to buy it. So those are
Hey,
different.
Mark, just go back a slide. Let me jump in on the Kind Bar. I actually have some personal experience with that. So the first time I ever heard of Kind Bar was probably about 10 years ago. And what they did, to your point, was they actually hired our students, not just our food marketing students, but college students as brand ambassadors, whatever you want to call them. And they didn't pay them a lot of money, but they basically had them doing influencing on campus, almost like you see like the social media influencers now. Three of my students actually parlayed that into full-time jobs with Kind Bar. And interestingly, they've gotten to the point now where they're pretty well tied. I don't know if Mars has 100% interest, but Mars had a joint venture with them, and now they've kind of extended that. So that is an awesome way to get your product there. In fact, I think we talked in a couple of the office hours with some of you about doing like festivals or doing community events or things like that. That would be an example of that.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Okay, so I'll take you through a quick, this is another example of a client that we worked with. They were looking to expand their distribution into the New York City market. They were at that time, they were mostly a Philadelphia-based regional candy business. This product's been around for 100 years. And if you're familiar with it all, it's another change maker. They make them, they're little, tiny, they're about an inch long and 3/4 of an inch tall, individually wrapped piece of candy. And because they wanted to get some trial amongst young adults quickly, we set up a program where we had pretty much what George was describing. We hired college kids to basically walk around with a backpack filled with these things, and they would just walk around Times Square on Christmas Eve, and while waiting for the ball to drop, and hand all these things out to anybody who would take them. And literally in 4 hours, we handed out 500,000 samples. So it's an incredible amount of reach with your food product very quickly. I will tell you that was the good news. We got lots of sampling. The problem was that we didn't know until hindsight. We thought through it. We didn't give them anything to hold on to remind them what that new product was. So basically they opened it, they ate it, they threw the wrapper on the ground, and whether they were drinking or not that night, the next morning, the awareness levels weren't holding on real tight in terms of what people remembered about that candy product we ate. So we had to do some follow-up work later to let everybody know that was us, but it was kind of a missed opportunity at that point. And then, as George mentioned, influencers are another way in today's market for sure, that you can do that. You can reach out, you send them samples, you send them information about your product. It's not a hard sell. You sort of want to give them some room to make their own decisions on it. The harder you push it, the less likely they're going to be in terms of writing anything about it, unless you're willing to really pay them a good bit for it. And that's not what you're looking to do. You're looking to hopefully get these people to write about it without having to pay them, just by giving them the samples and maybe some other merch that goes with it that makes them feel good about it. And a lot of these influencers, they want to be early adopters. They want to be the first person to tell you about this new product. So they sort of get into that whole mindset and can work on that. So it's a good opportunity to get some reach and some trial through a third party like that. If you do sampling in stores, like we've talked about, and again, if you've back before COVID, there was much more of this going on in grocery retailers, where you would see a nice older woman or gentleman standing there at a little table, and they would hand out the samples and hand out a little sales material about it that probably had a coupon. All good. It can be, it can get a little expensive to do that, but if you can share the cost with somebody else, that's a good idea, because it spreads the expense. And the important thing to remember is to make sure that if you're doing that the retailer has enough inventory on hand. If they only have a case of your product on the shelf and you're handing out coupons for 4 or 5 hours a day, and then most likely people are going to use it, as soon as those, whatever, 10, 12, 18 boxes or jars are gone, nobody can redeem their coupon anymore. So you want to make sure that you've worked beforehand to make sure there's enough inventory in hand. And you can be creative. So one of our clients we've talked a little bit about in the past is a butter company. And, when we sample butter, you can't give them, a tablespoon of butter and have them taste it. I mean, nobody really wants to eat butter that way. There are some people who do it, but so you have to figure out ways of sampling butter. So you spread it on a nice piece of artisan bread, or make it into croissants and then hand out croissants. We've done it that way. We've sampled it in bulletproof coffee, and where you brew the coffee and use the butter as part of that. We've even in some food shows, we've even done what we've cooked shrimp scampi on site with all the butter that goes along with that. That was really successful for us because at the food show we were at, most of the people weren't giving out food samples of that quality. It was not nearly that. So we really stood out that way. And Rita is a perfect example of, every year they open up in the spring, at least up here in the Northeast. And on the first day, they, try and encourage people to come back and remind them that they're open by, giving out samples of their water ice. So that's all sampling. That's, first blush at trying to get somebody to try it. On the retention side or the repeat side, some of the same tools are still useful. Couponing, you can get, obviously give people a coupon to buy it a second time. Loyalty and rewards programs, we're all familiar with those. Those can be very valuable in terms of holding on to people. Successive selling based on a previous purchase. So this happens all the time now when you go online, right? So if you've bought something, and retailers are really just scratching the surface of this. If you bought it once and put it in your cart, you want to have it as a manufacturer. You want to be the person that's like saying, oh, this is what you put in last time, you're going to put it in again. So it almost becomes automatic for it to be loaded into your, or at least the default for it to be loaded into your online shopping cart. So it's a definite tool that retailers and manufacturers are trying to work their way through as more and more people are buying their products online. Rebates and refunds, I'll show you a couple examples of those in a moment. And then contests and sweepstakes, which most of us are familiar with as well. And premiums are things that you can get if you buy X, you get a premium. So here's a couple examples, or actually not yet. One thing to point out with sampling, and I think I missed saying that when I was talking about the in-store sampling before, you absolutely have to give a coupon every time you sample. So you build that into the cost of that promotional effort, because if you're going to go to the trouble of putting a sample in somebody's hands, you want to really push them over the edge by giving them a coupon on that purchase right then, the day they're in the store. And there's lots of evidence to show that the lift, the sales volume happening that day of sampling is much higher. So you really want to take advantage of that. You can do free coupons if you can afford it. You can do cents off coupons. You can do on-pack and impact coupons. You can, we've seen those where, they used to be in store shelves where you can, they pop out or rip them off the shelf and use them instantly. There's handout coupons that, you can find at different events or whatever. And then the most common new wave, obviously, of couponing is digital, either on your website or on a retailer's app. So again, one way if you're spreading cost is to, do a joint promo with another product. Back to my butter example. So we try and sample the butter with another item. So it could be pancake mix. It could be a bread, a fresh loaf of bread or whatever from the retailer. Different things that you can combine it with, because consumers like that suggestive sell and they think they're getting, a deal on two products. Coupon mailers via direct mail, and most of us still get some of those. Valpak is one big example that you see where there's all kinds of coupons loaded into that you get maybe once a month. Pizza companies and other restaurants do a lot of menu deliveries. I get here in my office, I probably get one every 10 to 12 days. I get another menu from somebody that when my mail comes, he's delivering that as well. And then, another thing you can do to share costs and to gain a little bit of excitement is to cross promote with other retailers. We had somebody in a previous session of this. They had an ice cream place in a little strip mall, and they worked out a deal with the pizza place that was 3 doors down, where they would each give coupons on the other item in there. So they would offer coupons for pizza in their ice cream place, and in the pizza place, they would offer coupons for their ice cream. So it's a great way to double your reach, if you will. Things you have to work through if you're going to do couponing. You have to set up a redemption process and a clearinghouse who actually processes the coupons for you. They go from the retailer to a clearinghouse who then pays the retailer, and then you reimburse that clearinghouse. And you want to make sure you have the right legal copy on it so that you're protected in terms of misredemption and all that. It shouldn't be scary. It's just stuff for you to consider, but a lot of online resources can help you work through this these days. And so it's not as frightening as you might think, but it's an issue you should think about. Loyalty programs, again, most of us are familiar with this, whatever retailer we may be associated with. The whole goal for them is retention and increasing the average ring among those customers. And as a manufacturer, it can be a defensive tactic as well, so that you're the brand of choice in whatever the category is that you're competing in. Different ways this has been done, buy one and get a punch card where you get for every 10 you buy, you get a free sandwich or whatever it would be. Scan cards obviously are more the tool these days. Very powerful tool for retailers. That's why they're always trying to get you to sign up for it, because it gives them a fair amount of access to all the other things that you're buying, and allows them to do some customized marketing back to you to say, this is the kinds of things you might be interested in buying, or this is on sale or whatever. And then that's all funneled back to the manufacturers again, participate in that. So if my cracker is something that I'm trying to get some exposure for, the retailer knows, who's buying what kind of cracker, who likes organic crackers versus, cheap crackers versus whatever, and can help you identify the right audience for a price. You can, special offers can be customized, sort of like what I was just talking about. And very often, the rewards get bigger the more loyal you are. So the more you can sign up for that, and you get most of your purchasing through that, they'll offer you bigger rewards. This is other examples of loyalty programs, and like gift cards. Again, if you see restaurants do this around the holidays a lot, where they'll offer you $100 worth of gift cards for $80. So you save $20 off the top, and you have gift cards to give to family members or workers, co-workers, whoever you want to do. And it's a great way to drive some business with people that you may not be exposed to or have the opportunity to do that with. Refunds and rebates, we see some of this again in stores or sometimes in the circulars. People will buy one product and get a rebate on another, or buy multiple products and get rebates that way. And then premiums, as I mentioned earlier, one of the ones that is popular right at the moment when kids are going back to school is this one on the left, where if your student needs a new computer or whatever for school, if you buy it, they'll give you AirPods as part of the premium. So it's a way for them to offer value and really try and lock you into in this case, an Apple product as opposed to a PC. If if you ever have bought Apple products, they really don't discount the product very much. You don't see it on sale anywhere. You can't go to Best Buy and get it a lot cheaper than you know, a Mac store or an Apple store rather, but this is one way that they entice some premium purchasing with a dedicated audience. So these are, you know, it's only offered through education pricing and students and the like. So it's a incentive built around a somewhat narrow audience. Contests and sweepstakes, again, I think most of us are familiar with this. It is another way for you to do it. Social media is starting to figure out how to do some of these online through their social media and do contests or sweepstakes that way as a way to build loyalty within their audience. And there's an example of with Instagram, they're definitely, if you do a contest, the engagement levels are much higher than just a regular post. So as you can see here, likes are 3.5 more times and comments, you get a lot more comments with that. So it's not just what you're giving away, and very often it's not a very high value product that they're giving away in these contests. I've seen it, you know, where it's like a $10 gift card or whatever for large national brands, but it's really about trying to reinforce getting more engagement for it. They want people to either more comments or more sharing on their social channels so that they can spread that out. This is an example of one. You know, all you have to do in this case for Matt's Cookies out of Chicago is tag a friend that you like to go to the Lakefront Trail with. And, you know, there's virtually very little cost associated with this. They're choosing one winner that's going to get free cookies for a year. So, you know, maybe that's overall $100 or whatever it would be. That's not a very high price to do that, and it's very easy to manage. Same thing here. It's a follow-on tag to win program. Very similar. You know, this is a target audience that is most likely very interested in something like this, and they get, in this case, this prize pack has a whole variety of different nail polishes and stuff for them to try out and try different colors and stuff, which could then lead to further purchases. So those are all the different strategies and tactics associated with the consumer trial and consumer retention or repeat. Any questions on any of that before George runs with it? George?
You guys are quiet. You guys are quiet tonight. Come on. Do we have any questions? A lot of good stuff there. All right. We'll definitely allow some time at the end for sure to do that. Okay. Can everybody see that slide?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So again, I just want to kind of come back. So tonight we're talking about consumer and trade promotion. Next week's new product development. So again, and Mark and I are going to tag team next week as well. So if you have a product concept already, if you're kind of thinking through some things, we'll kind of give you a very similar presentation from both of our, you know, sides of the desk on how you want to think about new product development. So we're not going to necessarily talk about the science side of food, although I do have a few slides in there talking about that, talking about co-packers, talking about scaling, those kinds of things. So this isn't going to be like a recipe thing. It's going to be more, again, the business side of new product development from Mark's perspective and my perspective as well. So again, I did just want to kind of come back one more time and talk about the boot camp, just kind of get you excited about that. Hopefully Saturday, 9/11. Again, it'll be a couple hours in the morning for us to meet, and then a couple of hours in the afternoon, or as long as it takes to go through all the presentations. So if you're interested in that, there will be a link being set up and sent out from SBDC on that shortly, if it's not already done now. So what I thought I would do here is let's kind of bridge what Mark talked about and what I'm going to talk about here. And in at least 3 of my presentations, I've talked about funding, even though we're not going to talk about the financial side necessarily. But you've heard me say a couple of times, for those who've been on multiple sessions, you need money to get the product on the shelf, and you need money to get the product off the shelf. So the way, you know, Mark and I kind of think and work together is typically it's the salesperson's job. So let's say I'm the salesperson and Mark's the marketing person. It's my job to get the product on the shelf. So that's either through meetings, going out and seeing people in stores, doing demos, all that. And then it's marketing's job to get the product off the shelf. So you need money to do both. And I'll share some of that with you. So again, funding is really, 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 really important. So you've heard me say multiple times, perception is reality. And if you think about this, it's from a couple of sides. On one side, if you're going to sell your product through a third party, you have to convince them that your product solves a problem for them and for their consumers. And if you do that, that's going to get you where you want to be. Okay. And then ultimately you have to convince the consumer that your product's better than whatever their reference, the reference product is. So I've been doing this a long time for those of you that have been on multiple sessions. And I like to say I'm an old wise guy, which means I've been around for a long time and I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've also had a lot of successes as well. So this is one of the slides that talk about my action slide. And you're definitely going to need to do things here. You're going to have to make things happen. So you definitely want to be somebody who makes things happen here. Again, you've heard Mark and I in almost all of our sessions talking about the importance of planning. So you definitely need a consumer promotion plan and you definitely need a trade promotion plan. Really, real important to have both of those things going on here. So again, a lot of you are going to have choices on what kind of products to make, whether you're going to sell direct to consumer, whether you're going to sell through a third party, whether you're going to set up an e-commerce site, lots of ways to get your product to market. Again, each of those costs money. Some cost more money than others, so you have to think about that. And obviously a really, really important decision because it can have favorable consequences or negative consequences. Again, I've talked about, looking at data, looking at trends, analyzing the competition, seeing articles. I literally, this morning just saw an article on, since we've gone back with the mask mandate in a lot of areas of the country, restaurants are already seeing reservations canceled. People want to sit outside again. So there's a lot of things that happened last year that are kind of coming back. Some people just canceled reservations and not gone back. So that's an example of a data point. That's the so what. Then you have to think about, what does this mean? Why do you feel that way? And then how are you going to use that to your advantage? So for example, if you think about where we were with restaurants were kind of flying blind last year when they went to the outdoor dining. They had to rent tents. They had to get heaters in cold climates. They had to get air conditioners in warm climates. They had to get the local municipality maybe to change their zoning code that people eating outside. If you're selling alcohol, people had to get, be able to carry open containers, things like that. So the good news now, I think, is, and this article talked about that, most of the people that changed last year already know what's going to happen. The question we don't know is, are all the people that came out last year going to come back, or is there going to be a group of people that might be more concerned about the Delta variant than they were last year about what was going on last year? So that's an example of my three questions. You have a data point or somebody tells you something. What does this mean? Why do you feel that way? And then how are you going to implement or how are you going to take that information? So I've talked about this. This is pretty much, we're almost all the way through this process now. So next week, we're going to kind of talk about that product or service, but this is all about creating value. We talk about perceived value. And Mark talked about acquisition, retention, and development with some of the consumer promotion strategies. It's the same thing with trade promotion. So generally, trade promotion can be both acquisition and retention. If you go to a store and it's, save $1, buy one, get one free, 2 for $3, buy this, get that, maybe you'll get somebody new to try the product. Generally, if it's a buy one, get one, or 2 for $5 or 3 for $5, that's generally a tactic to get existing consumers to buy more, or we call it pantry load. So when you think of the difference between consumer promotion and trade promotion, we call one pull. So the consumer promotion, the marketing communication pulls people to the store, pulls people to the website. And then the trade promotion pushes the product out to the shelf or pushes the product on, on some online platform. So you may hear Mark and I talk about these two words, push promotion, pull promotion. That's the difference between consumer promotion and trade promotion. I talk about value all the time. Mark gave you a couple of examples earlier. I think of value as what benefit do I get and what do I have to go through to get it? So again, if you're able to get your product on the shelf, that's great. But make sure you have money left to get the product off the shelf. You have to make people aware of the product. You have to give them some information. So we have this, we call the stages of buyer readiness. We think of consumer behavior. It's awareness, knowledge, liking, preference, conviction, purchase. I'll say that again. Awareness, knowledge, liking, preference, conviction, purchase, and then hopefully post-purchase. So again, this kind of deals back more with Mark's side of the business, which is the communication piece. You have to make people aware of your product. You have to give them information, or they'll get knowledge on the product. You have to write your marketing copy and your packaging and however you present your product to the point where they're going to like your product, not like on the internet, not like a Facebook like, but like your product. And then when they go to make that purchase decision, and Mark talked about this a lot, we talked about shopper marketing, you have to get them to prefer your product over the alternative. Once we get them to buy the product, our job's not done, because we have to get them to come back and buy the product over and over and over again. So again, that's how I think about value when I do that. And again, when you're thinking about your marketing communication, think about this quote from Albert Einstein: if you can't explain it simply enough, you don't understand it well enough. So think about in your own personal lives, how many communication points do we have every day? It's probably thousands if you think about that. So a lot of these we don't even process. We see things, we don't process. Sometimes we see things and remember. If you think about, for those of you that drive on the interstate or the Schuylkill Expressway or 95 or Roosevelt Boulevard, Route 1, some main road, think about how many billboards you see when you're in your car. Well, obviously you're focused on driving in front of you, so you're not necessarily paying attention to billboards, or you're not paying attention to signs on the road or things like that. Okay, so you have to get your point across very quickly and very simply. People buy solutions to problems. Solutions equal sales and profits. So again, when you start thinking about how you're going to craft your sales presentation, and once you get the product into a retailer, then you have to go back, usually quarterly, and set quarterly promotions. So, every 3 months, you're going to have to go back and say, okay, you took my hot sauce in, here's my second quarter promotion. I'd like to do this in May, I'd like to do this in June, I'd like to do this in July. I'm sorry, April, May, and June. So typically the way retailers plan, it's first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. January, February, March, first quarter. April, May, and June, second quarter. July, August, September, third quarter. October, November, December, fourth quarter. And generally what we see in food stores is the fourth quarter is really, 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 really important, because we have a lot of big holidays in the fourth quarter. Halloween's become a really big holiday. Thanksgiving, huge food holiday, and then Christmas, which leads into New Year's. So generally, if you have a product that's a seasonal product or a product that would go well in parties, retailers want to talk to you about that, because they do a lot of their business October, November, December. Conversely, if you have a product that sells well during the summer, maybe when sales aren't as good, that's going to bring somebody into the store, or is going to get people to put more stuff on their shopping cart, or is going to get people to come back more frequently. Remember, acquire, retain, develop. Okay. Basket size, loyalty, frequency, all those things we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That's really important. You'll get the retailer's attention. Here's my money slide. Really important for trade promotion and consumer promotion. Who you are, what you do, how you're different, and why you're better. And in this case, again, what problems do you solve for the customer and the consumer? So you have to understand both sides. Some of you, when you put your budgets together and you start getting experience, you're going to spend more money on consumer promotion, the stuff that Mark talked about, than trade promotion, the stuff I'm talking about. Conversely, some of you are going to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to spend all of my budget on trade promotion because I want to get people to buy the product, buy it now, buy a lot of it, as an example. Okay. So please don't forget this, right? This is your differential advantage. Differential advantage versus competition, differential advantage with customers versus other customers. There's a lot of different ways you can look at and interpret this slide. Know what problems you solve for the customer, really important. So on the very first session, I talked about this concept called economic value proposition. And again, to refresh your memory, what we talked about here is there's three things that you give customers and consumers: less of something, the same of something, or more of something. And that something's probably your product or service, right? And the less, same, and more is determined by them, not determined by you. And then they're going to give you less money, the same money, or more money. So again, when you think about this, They're going to evaluate, do I want to do this consumer promotion with Mark's company, or do I want to do this trade promotion with George's company? Well, Mark's going to get new people into the store. Mark's going to get more people to trade up and put more stuff in their basket. Mark's going to get people to buy more expensive stuff. Mark's going to get them to visit an area of the store that they wouldn't normally go to. Okay, that's one. George, we're going to put at the front of the store, or back by the dairy or the deli case, and people are going to buy 3 boxes of Tasty Cake. And I think we get them to buy 3 boxes of Tasty Cake for $5 or $6. Wow, that's way more than getting them to buy 1 box of Tasty Cake for $2. So when you think about this concept of economic value proposition, you have to understand where you fit, where your product fits, and the reference group of the competition. Because when you talk to the retailer is going to have in her or his mind an idea of where your product's going to go on the shelf, where your product's going to go in the store, what weeks your product might fit. Or a lot of the retailers have scheduled promotions. They have themed promotions. For those of you who are from Philadelphia, probably the one that comes to mind most is the ShopRite Can sale. So we come out of the holidays in the first couple of weeks in January, and ShopRite does this huge promotion called Can. So they want to put brands in the ShopRite Can sale that obviously fit that promotion, but they're also going to either bring people in the store or have people buy like multiple units or even cases. So I can tell you for many, many, many years, I would go to ShopRite the first or second week in January and buy cases of tomato sauce, cases of soup, cases of olive oil, cases like by the case. They were selling cases as an example. So again, when you think about this, think about where you fit. And remember what I said, very, very important. You never want to be in that middle box. You never want to go to the retailer and say, I have the same product as my competition, and I'm going to charge you the same price, and I'm going to give you the same promotion schedule. There has to be some difference there that makes the retailer want to take your product and promote your product. So let me stop there for a minute. Do we have any questions on that or anything I've talked about so far? Great. Okay. Okay, so remember, back on the consumer behavior part, what are people looking for? They want relevancy, they want clarity, they want simplicity, and they want to enjoy it. They want a really good experience. Yes, they want a great price, they want value. Or I like to say the 4 key consumer drivers. You have to know what problem or where you fit. Saves me time, saves me money, entertains me, is good for me. And we've talked before, I'm actually going to add a 5th bullet on here, safety. Okay, whether it's food safety, whether it's personal safety, whether it's I feel more comfortable. I'll give you an example from last year with COVID. We all thought that, I mean, Walmart did well, but we all thought that Walmart was going to do really, really, really well because they were a one-stop shop. So they were considered an essential business because they sold food. But you could also go to Walmart and get clothes and batteries and laundry detergent and golf clubs and all that stuff. But people felt uncomfortable about going to Walmart because the store was so big. And before we had the mask mandate, before we had the vaccine, a lot of people did not want to be around that large group of people. So Walmart had some issues as well. So I'm going to add safety on here as a consumer driver in my world as well. Okay, so let's talk about a little deep dive into trade promotion. When you think about this, some of these are similar to what Mark talked about, but this is basically, again, we talk about this push versus pull. This is money that you're going to go to a retailer and say, I will give you X amount of dollars, either like a check for $5,000, $500, or I am going to take off $1 per case, 10 cents per box, 20 cents per package, whatever. Okay, that's called an allowance, discount, and deal. And in return for me reducing the cost of my product to you, Mrs. Retailer, I'm going to ask you to reduce the retail of the product to the consumer. So this is a negotiation back and forth. Remember, the retailer decides what the retail price is, and the retailer can decide what the promoted price is. So all you can do with the retailer is go and say, if I give you 20 cents off per package, you have to reduce the price of your product at least 20 cents. That you can do, but you can't tell them that you're going to give them 50 cents off and they have to do buy one, get one free, as an example. Okay. Mark talked about trade shows. So trade shows kind of bridge both consumer and trade promotion. because typically the people that attend trade shows are the buyers, are the store managers, are the operations people. So this is really a really good place to meet people. For you all that are probably going to have small businesses and specialty businesses, I would tell you the best show to go to, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit next week as well, is called the Fancy Food Show. If you're on the East Coast, which I think most of you are, it's typically in June up in New York City and Manhattan at the Jacob Javits Center. So you can go as a consumer or, you know, a potential customer. I think it might cost you like $50 to go and get in and walk the show. If you go as an exhibitor, it's going to cost you a couple $1,000. And what Mark talked about before was very, very important that when you think about how you present your product, whether it's the package, whether it's the booth, whether it's advertising, you want to make sure that you have integrated marketing communications, that everything kind of looks and feels the same. So for those of you that sat in the session with Mark and Jeff a couple of weeks ago on graphic design, that's Jeff's world. In fact, Jeff actually designed trade show booths for me when I was at Tasty Cake. So I would sit down with Jeff and say, here's what we're looking for. Here's the strategy. Either we're going to feature a new product, or we want to get these kind of retailers in the booth, or we want to get people to know that we have this new product coming out, whatever it is. And then we would work with people like Mark. So Mark would help develop the marketing communication, and then Jeff would do the visual stuff. And then I would bring my sales team and I would give them all the, you know, brochures and stuff like that and say, here's who we're going after. Here's what we want them to say. And here's what we want them to try. And we actually had a trade promotion meeting where we would kind of divide and conquer. So I had all of my key account team there. So the people that had called on Walmart, obviously if Walmart came into the booth, they would talk to Walmart. All right. So that's what a trade show is. Co-op average. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, let me just interrupt for a sec. So the Fancy Food Show that George is referring to, what they have done the last few years as well is they'll have state areas where they'll help share the cost of what a booth will cost there. And so they'll buy space that for Pennsylvania or New Jersey or whoever it is, and then different manufacturers within that state can rent a table within that set at a different, you know, reduced cost. And it just makes it a little bit easier for smaller companies like you to participate in a major event like that.
Yeah, the other thing the Fancy Food Show has done is they actually are featuring new products, so you can actually get in for less money. You have to join, so I'll put the information up in the chat, but it's called the Specialty Food Association, SFA. Or if you go to NASFT, National Association of Specialty Food Trade, but the show is actually called the Fancy Food Show. And what I typically encourage people that I'm working with is to go walk the show the first time. Don't go spend the money on a booth. Go walk and see what other people are doing, and then figure out whether it makes sense for you to do that. In fact, Mark and I have walked the show together many times, and Mark's brought a few of his clients up there as well to do that. So really, really a viable show. It will cost, for most of you, a good amount of money, but nowhere near what some of those other national shows are. And that's a great way for small businesses to get their product in front of people as well. So Mark talked about promotional products. I won't talk about that. I will talk about point of purchase displays. So think about if you get a product on the shelf, there's going to be an area in the store that the retailer is going to say, this is going to go with the hot sauce, the barbecue sauce. This is going to go with baked goods. This is going to go in the deli. This is going to go, wherever. Then you can actually, with trade promotion, go to them and say, my product pairs really well with chicken, beef, fish. So I want to get out of that barbecue sauce aisle, and I want to put a display in the back where the meat case is. Or we think our product goes really well for parties. So if you think about how a lot of the stores merchandise seasonally around parties like the Super Bowl, is they put the soda together with the chips, with the dips, with the salsa. Or if you think about barbecue, a lot of times you'll see, ketchup and relish and mustard back where the hot dogs are. Maybe the hot dog rolls are back there as well. So that's trade promotion. That's somebody in that company going in saying, we would like to give you money, an allowance. So, either an allowance, or we'd like to give you cash, not cash, but a check. And for that, we want you to give us displays in every store. For that, we want you to give us displays at the cash register. For that, we want you to give us an extra display by the deli or the speedy checkout lane or something like that. So that anytime you see point of purchase display, typically that's separate from where your permanent shelf space is. Now, many of you that are going to try to sell your product are probably not going to get permanent space to start. So you might have to go into seasonal space, or you might have to go into some promotional space or something like that. Okay. So when you hear this concept of trade promotion, it's basically you going to a retailer with money. Either we call it, flat money, or, a fixed amount. I'm going to give you $500, $5,000. Or what a lot of people try to do is get them to, do it per unit, per package, per case, so that they actually have to buy that. So there's a couple different strategies behind how you would execute trade promotion. Bigger companies get into this concept called an accrual. So they might go to a retailer and say, we're going to give you $1 a case on every case that we sell, and we're going to put that in a little bucket or an accrual. And then when we come back every quarter, we're going to tell you how much money you have to spend on either consumer promotion or trade promotion or both to try to get people to buy more product. That's called an accrual, or, again, a case allowance or something like that. So again, this is the part where this is going to cost you money. We call this pay to play. It's going to cost you money sometimes to actually put the product on the shelf. We'll talk about this next week with the new products, but it's called slotting allowance, and it's legal. Retailers can charge you to put your product on the shelf. So I'll spend much more time next week talking about that. All right, so again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We will make this presentation available, but there's a lot of techniques. We'll talk about who the primary target is, whether it's the trade or consumers or both. And then there's a descriptor of how this works. So for those that are a little blurry on what I just talked about, that previous slide, there's actually definitions here on how that works. And again, I would encourage all of you guys to come on to the office hours tomorrow night. We're happy to sit down and go through, either pop this slide up and go through more detail to make sure you really understand what we're doing here. So let's talk a little bit about retailer manufacturer relationships. Again, I came from the manufacturing world, and so I kind of speak that language, but I was only successful if I was able to have a collaborative relationship with the retailer. So even though I've been at a Tasty Cake for 13 years now, I still have friends on the retail side that I've kept my friendships and kept my relationships with them over time, because I didn't build it overnight, and I certainly don't want to lose it overnight as well. So you're not going to have a relationship the first time you go in, but you will find with specific retailers or specific channels or specific buyers that you'll connect with them. And that's really, really important, that relationship part. So the reason why that's important is retailers want to make money, manufacturers want to make money. So if you think of it in context of how can I help this retailer make money? Because if I help them make money, I'm going to make money. That's the thought process you want to go through here. So when we think about this, again, for both retailers and manufacturers, who's buying, what are they buying, when are they buying, where are they buying, why are they buying, how are they buying? Both sides really need to understand this, and where you connect with the retailer is if you can go through and say, my customer is your customer. I have a morning day part product. I have a night product. I have an entertainment product. I have a party product. I have a healthcare product. Where are they buying? Are they buying in store? Are they buying online? Are they doing both? Why are they buying? Again, saves me time, saves me money, entertains me, is good for me. I feel safe. And then how are they buying? Are they buying once a year, once a month, once a week, online, credit card, cash? Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can think about that. Okay. So again, when we think about the shopper, right, we could talk about descriptors or profiles. They call profiles, the who. That's age, income, race, ethnicity, education level, where they live. We could talk about behaviors. What do they buy? How do they buy? Where do they buy? Why do they buy? Attitudes. So again, we spent a lot of time in a lot of the sessions talking about this because it's really, really, really important. You need to understand your customer and consumer. So some of the questions, again, that big manufacturers have to know is what % of households buy my brand? I'll give you a great example. Mark and I were actually with one of our friends last night, Mark Tarswell, who's Chief Operating Officer for Mrs. T's Pierogies. So for those of you that are not familiar with the pierogi, I call it a Polish ravioli, if you know what a ravioli is. But it's basically a dough that's stuffed with something much like a ravioli. Well, we happen to be from Philadelphia to central Pennsylvania to Pittsburgh and eastern Ohio, like Cleveland, Columbus, Canton, those areas. That's the pierogi belt. So if you think of a product that kind of emanated from Poland and Eastern Europe, there's more pierogi sold between Philadelphia and Cleveland than the rest of the country. So that would be an example of, if you're trying to sell pierogies in California, probably not a good thing. Probably trying to sell pierogies in Texas, probably not going to sell. But you're going to sell a lot of pierogies in the Northeast. So that's an example of percent of households. How frequently do they buy my brand? So think about a brand that you buy over and over and over again. Maybe you buy it weekly. Maybe you buy it a couple times a month. Certainly you're going to buy it more than once a year. And then think about a brand you only buy once a year. Really important. How much do customers spend per trip on my product or on my brand? How much do they spend per year? How loyal are my customers? And big companies actually have access to data, consumer data, and they actually have these measures. What segments spend the most on my brand? How are they different than the competitor? How's this changed over time? So this is back to my so what, why, and how. When you talk to the retailer, if you have any of this information, you can go in and say, you need my product because, for example, in the pierogies, every retailer from Philadelphia to Cleveland should be selling pierogies. Once you get north of that, south of that, or west of that, maybe you don't need either as many stores selling pierogies, or you certainly don't need as many boxes or packages on the shelf. So that would be an example of you as the manufacturer going to the retailer and saying, I know my customer, I know your customer, here's why you need my product. Okay, so that's really important. You need to understand who your competitor or customers are. So for many of you that are all small businesses, I think I suggested, go to festivals, go to farmers markets, go to places where you can sample, and you can do your own marketing research. Again, it's going to be qualitative. It's not going to be quantitative, but you can actually test your concept. You can actually do test the concept and do your proof of concept and sample. Give people, do you like this flavor? Do you like that flavor? How many times might you buy this? Are you going to buy this flavor all the time? Maybe this flavor once in a while, those kinds of things. So you can, kind of get to some of these questions without spending a lot of money. Now, on the flip side, the retailers really need to understand their shopper. What's the shopper penetration? What households shop my chain versus shopping my competition? How frequently do they shop there? How much do they spend per trip, per year? What segments? So these questions are pretty similar, aren't they? If you look at the previous slide and this slide. So this is where, again, the collaboration comes back. I'll give you a great example for those of you that are from the Northeast. Tasty Cake was when I worked there, headquartered in Philadelphia. It's now owned by a company in Georgia. They're a national company. When I worked there, we were a regional company trying to become a national company. Wawa is really strong in the tri-state area, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. So where Tasty Cake had our brand strength was exactly where Wawa had their brand strength. So we were able to go to Wawa and say, our customer's your customer. People that love our brand are very similar to people that love your brand. You need our product in all your stores. And you need our product to have more space than the competition. And you need our product to have prominent your location in the store. So we would go in over time with data and show them, if you do this, we're going to increase your sales more than Edmunds or Hostess or Little Debbie or Drake's or Dolly Madison, as an example. Okay, so that's where the collaboration comes back. Now, I'll give you an example that worked the other way. Wawa had stores in North Jersey and South Jersey. The Tasty Cake brand was very strong in South Jersey, but not as strong in North Jersey. In North Jersey, Entenmann's was actually a stronger brand than Tasty Cake. So we actually went to Wawa and said, yes, you should have Entenmann's in your stores, but you should only have them in these stores. And you still need us, but we don't need as much space. So we actually went and kind of told them why they needed our competition store. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but that's what you're supposed to do. That's really what you're supposed to do. Your job is to help them sell more stuff. And again, if your product's on the shelf and you happen to have the largest market share, if they sell more stuff, you're going to sell more stuff. So again, now where the collaboration comes back is if you really understand what kind of people shop the category, what percent of households buy, how often, how much. This gets back to that acquisition, retention, development. This gets back to Mark talked about basket size or making the ring bigger. So this is where the quantitative thing comes in. Now, obviously, if you're a brand new company, the retailer's going to have to take a shot with you. But the retailer has the data. They have that, Mark talked about that loyalty card. They're able to go back and say, okay, George, you think that young African-American millennials married are going to be the big target market for the product. We know in our stores, profile-wise, we know who the young married African-American couples are, millennial. And they can actually go back and measure. And that's where the collaboration comes back, where you go to one meeting and they say, yep, sales went up 15%. And most of the people that drove those sales were millennial African-American married couples, as an example. So that's that collaboration part. That's going to happen over time. You're not going to make that happen the first time you see somebody. So also, if you think about how you are going to get your product to market, you might need a distributor. So you need to understand what problem you solve for the distributor, as an example. So Mark kind of talked about the sales promotion thing. I'm not going to talk about that too much. These are examples of, again, the trade promotion. So you're going to give them a reduced price off invoice. Maybe you're going to give them payment terms. Maybe they're supposed to say, pay you in 2 weeks. You're going to let them pay in a month or 90 days. Market development funds would be that example of accrual. So you're going to either agree to a certain number, $500 a month, $5,000 a year, or so much per case, so much per box, that then both of you decide how you're going to do that. Sell-through guarantees. So this literally is, you go to the retailer and say, if you take my product, I guarantee it's going to sell. And remember with the guarantee, if you guarantee it's going to sell, if it doesn't sell, you have to buy the product back. So be careful with that. Failure fees are just what they sound like. The retailer may come back and say, hey, Mark, love your presentation, love your product. I'll take the product, but if it doesn't work, you're going to give me X amount of dollars. All right. So again, you want to understand all these terms before you go in. And then co-op advertising, again, that's money that you give the retailer to either advertise in their circular, advertise in their online platform, do promotions with them. And then bracket pricing is basically, you guys aren't there yet, but when you get the bigger companies, that's where you get into volume discounts. So you can go in and say, if you buy 100 boxes, you get this price. If you buy 200 boxes, you get this price. And there's definitely, different brackets that you would take advantage of with that. So when we think of the trade promotion tools, again, we've talked about a lot of these, right? There's a lot of different tools you have in your toolbox to do that. What are manufacturers' expectations of retail performance? Well, if you're going to give somebody money, if you're going to give somebody, promotion, or you're going to go to market and have them do coupons or do all this communication, then you better expect them to put the product on the shelf. You better expect that when you agree to a price or agree to a promotion or agree to something, that people are going to take that. When you agree to a promotional price, you're going to have to hope that they do that, and they're going to take new items or, again, put you in the planogram. Okay. When we think of manufacturers' expectations of retail performance, again, in-store merchandising, displays, TPRs, pricing, distribution, consistent distribution. You want to make sure that if they agree that they're going to take you in all 100 stores, that you're in all 100 stores. The mutual benefits increase sales and profits. So again, when we think about some of these things, advertising works in conjunction with sales promotion, works in conjunction with trade promotion. When you think about that, again, let's say the retailers in the middle, we have you, the manufacturer, we have the consumer, and this is back on the push and pull. So you need to think about, again, whether you're trying to create awareness, provide knowledge, get them to prefer your product, get them to try the product, get them to come back and buy it again. One of the things we'll talk about next week is with new product development, is a thing called ATU, awareness, trial, and usage. So we can measure how many people are aware of the product. We can measure how many people try the product, and then we can measure how many people come back and repeat purchase and buy it over and over and over again. And again, the retailers have this data too. So here's an example where the retailer would come back and say, yes, we had so many new users come in, and they came back and bought it again. That's a good thing. That's really a good thing. So again, ultimately, to be successful over the long haul, you need both. You really need trade and consumer promotion. You know, and Mark and I had some really interesting discussions over the years at Tasty Cake, because when I started at Tasty Cake, I can't believe I met Mark 35 years ago, but I met Mark in 1986. We were very much a consumer-driven company, and Mark worked for the ad agency that did all of our advertising. I think I shared with you guys, Nobody Bakes a Cake as Tasty as a Tasty Cake was a campaign that Mark and his agency created for us back in the 70s. I wasn't even there then when it was created. And we spent a lot of money on consumer promotion. We spent a lot of money on consumer marketing and advertising. And then over time, we found that we were spending more and more money on trade promotion. And Mark and I used to have these discussions all the time. He's like, George, I get what you're doing, but you can't ignore the consumer. And again, over like a 10 or 15 year period, we went from basically, you know, let's say 75% consumer budget and 25% trade to like 90% trade and 10% consumer. We really got out of whack. That's not a good thing. Okay, there's some stats here. I want to kind of skip through the stats, but again, if you go back and look at that, it'll see how consumers respond to trade promotion. Here's a great example. Supermarkets lose like 1/4 of their loyal shoppers annually. Well, where do they go? They're going to Walmart, they're going to drugstores, they're going to warehouse clubs, they're going to Amazon now. So if you're a retailer and you're losing business, you want to know the kind of products going to bring people back to your store, as an example here. Some of these dealt with Mark stuff, which I think we talked about already. I've talked about this a little bit, but some of the reasons why you might want to do consumer trade promotion would be to speed up the purchase, to get them to stockpile, to increase consumption, to get them to switch brands, or maybe an unplanned purchase. So think about we call this an expandable consumable. If you have a snack product, there's a reason when you go to the grocery store that all the snack stuff and indulgence stuff's on end caps. And that's because if retailers can get you to buy the bag of Doritos or Hershey's chips or Oreos or Ben and Jerry's, you're going to eat that faster. But if they put toilet paper, well, toilet paper is probably a bad one with COVID, but if they put something like rice, yeah, I like rice, but I'm not going to have a box of rice every day, or maybe not even every week. So that's more like a staple. If you've ever heard the term staple, toothpaste is probably another great one, right? So that's why there's different reasons why we do, we have different strategies going through what we want to do with promotion. I'm going to skip through that. Manufacturer. Again, once you get in, the trade promotion strategy might be you want to sell more during the peak sales period, or you want to try to flatten out that curve and say, hey, we're going to spend more money in the slower time because we want to keep the plant running, or we want to keep making stuff, or whatever. There's a reason why you want to sell more when people are buying seasonally, and there's a reason why you might want to sell more when people aren't buying, as an example. And again, you really need to understand what the retailer strategy is as well. Probably the key thing here is minimize the addiction. Do not get hooked on just doing trade promotion. That's a no-no. I can tell you that from experience. And again, ultimate goal, maximize sales, minimize spend. Again, I think I've given you all these examples here. When you get bigger, you're going to get involved in scan backs and bill backs, but most of you guys probably aren't there yet. That would be a negotiation thing where you only pay when the product scans at the register. That's a scan back. Or you only pay when the product's delivered to the back door. Those are two kind of concepts that we talk about. All of them cost money. Here's an example of retail execution. This happens to be Hormel. So here's an example where they partnered with ShopRite and saved $10 on groceries. Here's an example where they gave a digital coupon out. Here's an example of a trade promotion, save $5 when you buy all these products. This would be an example of point of purchase display right here. So that's something supplemental for pepperoni. Here's an example of a trade promotion 2 for $7. So Hormel went, or Hormel pepperoni, and said, we're going to give you 50 cents off a bag, and we want you to sell it for 2 for $7. And again, you guys see this every day in the course of your everyday lives. Okay, just some brand questions. What problem does your brand solve? Who's the ideal customer? Who's the competition? How do we make customers feel? What do I want the personnel for my brand to be? A lot of great questions. And Mark spent a lot of time on this when we did our brand strategy session, so I don't want to spend a lot of time here. But remember, 2 reasons why somebody buys something: rational and emotional. And then the path to purchase. So we talked about this in the brand section, brand strategy section, but there's a flow of how people buy things. There's a flow with how people decide how they're going to buy things. So again, I would encourage all of you guys to go back to that. And again, if you have any questions, please pop on to our office hours tomorrow night. So it's all getting down to these 3 things. Can I put more stuff in the basket? Can I have people more loyal to my brand or to the retailer's brand? And can I get people to come back more often? That's Retail 101. Or as I like to say, acquire, retain, and develop. So when we think of the price, again, it's how people think about that. And I spent a lot of time a couple of weeks ago talking about it. We've talked about pricing, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But you really need to understand who the trade customer is, who the target market is, who the competitors are. Are you making something shelf stable? Or are you making something perishable? Are you going to make it in a commercial kitchen or a co-packer? And I'm going to spend way more time next week talking about this. I actually have a slide on my presentation next week on new products. But this is all the stuff you have to have all the answers to these before you go to the retailer. Here's an example of pricing, and I'll spend just a few minutes here, and then we'll kind of go to Q&A. So let's say that you think your product's going to have a $10 retail price. The retailer has to make a profit. So you need to know what the retailer's normal required margin is. I put 30% in here. So if you're telling the retailer that you want them to sell this for $10, they're going to say, hey, I got to pay $7. If you use somebody, a wholesaler or distributor, to sell the product, well, they got to make money too. And they make their percentage off of this number. So 30% of $7 is $4.90. That gets you to that. If you're using a broker is somebody who represents you and gets a meeting with the customer because they have a relationship, that's 5%. And that's 5% off of the $7. So you're not actually collecting $7 here. You're only collecting $4.55. Then it costs you something to make the product. So you're only really your gross profit, not the money you put in your pocket, because you still have fixed costs like manager, salary, rent, all that. You have to pay, you have earnings, you have to pay taxes. So you're making something less than $1.50 profit per package, per box, per whatever. And then the trade promotions on top of this. So remember, the customer and consumer determine who makes money, and profits the outcome of satisfying customer and consumer needs and wants better than the competition. All right, so I think we are at the end of our piece here. So I'm going to stop the share and see if we have any questions. I apologize for going right up. So we'll hang on for a couple minutes if you guys have questions. And I know, Divya, did you put the survey in the chat?
Yep.
Yep, I did.
Yeah, you might want to, we take everybody through that.
Yep, so I have put the link to the office hours tomorrow. Please register for that. If you have any specific questions, this is a very nice opportunity. I have also put a link to the survey. This is required by our funders, the Small Business Administration, so that we can provide no-cost webinars to you all. And you will also find a link to our resources document. You can see the upcoming webinars there and register for that. If you have any questions in the chat, okay, yeah. Are farmers markets good places to build awareness of my product and do trial samples? Are they worth it?
Yes, yes, and yes, Stacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one. I think I talked about this with a couple of folks in the consulting sessions. Typically, you can go for maybe like 20 or 25 bucks a week and get a table at these places. So again, there is a little bit of a cost, but not a huge investment. Some of them get a couple hundred people. I actually go to a farmer's market in Havertown, which is a suburb of Philadelphia. I go every other week. I choose not to go every week because the product that I'm selling is not like an every week product. And I go every other week and I make, now I work there, the booth myself, but I make enough money to pay the booth space. I make enough money to pay me. And again, my goal is really to create awareness for my business. And while I want to sell stuff at the farmer's market, I'm really trying to sell catering because I make way more money on catering than I do selling, one sandwich or a soup or something like that. But yes, to answer your question, yes, that's a great place to go prove your business case. because you can do that over time. You can, again, you can only be in one place at one time, but you go to maybe like 5 farmers markets a week if you're able to invest that time. And maybe people in, for those of you that are familiar with Philadelphia, we actually have the food trust. They do stuff all over the city. Well, I can tell you, people in Northeast Philadelphia are going to act differently than people in South Philadelphia or people in West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. So you can go to different places and start figuring out what kind of people like your product, maybe what kind of people don't.
And it's a great way to get some feedback on that product. So while they're there, as we talked about earlier, you're going to get awareness, you can do some sampling, but also get feedback on your whole concept, on your product, whatever it is. Free research.
Yes, Stacy, you definitely need insurance. We'll talk about this next week. You definitely should have insurance, even if you have somebody else making the product, but I'll talk about that a little more next week. Yes, you definitely need insurance if you're going to commercialize the product. Yep. Laura, how can we help?
You can put your question in the chat or Q&A.
Up there.
That's okay. Yeah, if you guys, I mean, we could definitely do a deep dive. Both Mark and I have had really good dialogue with some of you in the the Thursday sessions, and that's really what they're designed for. Obviously, we can spend more time with you there. And again, I would encourage all of you to participate in the boot camp and then present your product. That we'll give you honest feedback. It might not be something you like, but you're better off hearing stuff from us than spending a lot of time and money on something that people maybe don't want because you didn't properly test the business concept.
Thank you so much, Mark and George, and thank you everyone for joining.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.